So now that we're talking about, we're in philosophy, we're into the fourth quadrant now. Let me just draw it out really quick again. We talked about science, we talked about religion, we talked about art. Now we're in philosophy, hopefully later history. The fifth. The questionable fifth. So, philosophy. I want to start it off by saying that a lot of philosophers throughout the ages have tried to come up with rational explanations for religion. So one example would be actually, now that I think about it, a good way to order this would be if you did philosophy of science first, philosophy of religion, philosophy of art next, and then philosophy of history. But because that would take a lot of time, I don't want to do that. So let's just do philosophy of religion. One thing I want to say is, okay, so philosophers have tried to come up with rational explanations for religion. So a fascinating thing is, back in the day, guys like Saint Aquinas, a lot of the people who Christians see as saints now, they didn't look at the Bible literally. They looked at it metaphorically. Fundamentalism, looking at the Bible literally, actually is more of a modern phenomena, and they say that this has occurred, this growth of fundamentalism or interpreting the Bible literally. This has become dominant because it's a backlash against atheism and people going against religion. But a lot of the church fathers, a lot of the people who are considered saints, did not look at the Bible literally. And they say that it was not meant to be interpreted literally. So, for instance, in Genesis, hopefully I can talk about this more, but well, first off, I want to say that you always see contradictions throughout the Bible, and I think that this is intentional. So, for instance, if you look at Chronicles and you look at Kings, you'll see a lot of contradictions. I think that it's not meant to be taken literally. I think the contradictions, you could look at it, some people look at it and they say, oh, it must be written by different authors, it must be written at different times. Or you could look at it this way. You could say, it's not meant, there's supposed to be contradictions. Whoever compiled this didn't take these contradictions out. Why? Because he knows it's not meant to be taken literally. And another thing would be like Genesis, there's two different creation accounts. And then you go throughout the whole Bible, you always see contradictions. One example too, one thing I think was funny was when Moses, God, once again, God is always telling, because the Israelites are disobeying, once again, it's not a bad thing. The Israelites are portrayed as fourth quadrant oriented, while the Gentiles in the Bible are portrayed as second quadrant oriented. But God is saying, we should I'm going to wipe out all the Israelites because they're starting to make me upset. They're not obeying me. So then Moses says, God, but if you wipe us out, then... So once again, Moses is portrayed as fourth quadrant. He's not saying, okay, go ahead, do what you want. He's saying, like Noah. Noah said, okay, go ahead, destroy the world. Moses is questioning him. He's saying, you know what, if you do this, you're going to look bad. You shouldn't do this. Then what are people going to say about you, God, if you destroy the people who were your chosen people who you're supposed to save? So God's like, you know what, Moses, you're right. So he ends up not destroying the Israelites. And then the very next chapter, Moses is like, our God is an amazing God. Our God does not bargain. He does not, what was the word? He cannot be bribed. So he cannot be bribed. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It seemed like Moses was kind of bribing him right there. A lot of religious people are going to say, oh gosh, I can't believe you said that. But you just have to read the actual stuff and see that what I say is true. All right. So people try to come up with rational explanations for what occurred. So you'll see people say, when I went to that one guy's place, the Pastor Joshua's place, he tried to come up with rational explanations for what occurred in the Bible. So he said that the Noah's flood, it must be based off of actual floods that occurred at that time. And the Israelites said, and it says in the account, that it occurred throughout the whole world. But according to the Israelites, the whole world was just the world that they knew. So there must have been a big flood, and it must have killed a lot of people, but in that area in Mesopotamia. But they said it was a whole world, but that was just because they didn't understand that the world was larger than they thought it was. So people look at other accounts like the Epic of Gilgamesh and other accounts throughout the world of flood stories, and they say, see, there must have been floods in these stories in these areas too. Another way to look at it is it's just a myth is a truth portrayed metaphorically. So the flood myth we talked about, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. So what happens is, even if the world would be destroyed by a flood, a rebirth would happen, and things would happen the same way that they did before. The animals would come back the same type of way. This would be what the myth is trying to portray if you want to look at it scientifically. And that's what happened in the flood story. Noah takes two of every kind of animal, and then he repopulates the earth. So even though it was destroyed, it comes back. And it's metaphorical of this death and resurrection. So then you have, what's other examples of what he said? So I've heard other things where, so you have the story of, what was the names? It wasn't Jacob and Esau, but what was the guys' names? Cain and Abel. So you have Cain and Abel, and Cain kills Abel. And then people take this literally and they say, oh, this really happened. Okay. But another way to interpret it is this. I've heard the rational explanation. I'm not endorsing anything. I'm just saying I'm on philosophy now, so now I'm giving rational explanations of religion that people make. I'm not saying what I believe. So people say, okay, what actually happened was, this is a metaphor, and so what happened was Cain, he sacrificed animals to God, and God liked this. But, Cain sacrificed, I messed up. Cain sacrificed vegetables or something. Yeah, vegetables to God. And then God didn't like that. And then Abel, he sacrificed meat, food, that has substance. He sacrificed animals to God, and God liked this a lot. So what Cain does is he says, you know what, I'm kind of jealous, and he kills Abel. And then Abel, he's dead, and then Cain actually, you think that Cain did something bad. Actually what happens is God says Cain should be protected. And he puts a mark on Cain's forehead, and Cain is then protected by God because this mark signifies God's protection. It doesn't say what the mark of the forehead was, but after this, Cain was protected by God. And so the rational explanation is this. People say, okay, well, let's look at this. This is a metaphor. This is a myth, and it's metaphorical. So what Cain represented was the agricultural peoples, because he sacrificed vegetables. So he's more agricultural, farming oriented. And Abel, who sacrificed the animals, he represented nomadic people, hunter-gatherers, the hunters. And what happened was Cain, the farmer, ended up killing the hunter-gatherer, the nomad. And they say, well, this happened in history. The people who were agricultural ended up taking the land, they ended up dominating it. They became powerful, and they just kind of took over. And the nomadic people were kind of absorbed into agriculturalism or agricultural stuff. So they say, okay, so this is what this myth is trying to portray. And they say the same thing with Jacob and Esau. Jacob takes Esau's birthright, and they say, well, Jacob was a tent dweller, kind of representing agricultural, and Esau, he was a nomad, a hunter. So this is the same type of metaphor that we saw before. And then people look at the Gospels and they say not only can these be interpreted rationally, but they're supposed to be interpreted rationally. So, for instance, there's the story where Jesus walks on the water, and what happens is it says that there was a wind, a long wind, and the people in the boat went 3 or 4 miles. Now so 3 or 4 miles. I don't think it's an accent they use that number, and also in another gospel account it says that this happened on Jesus' fourth watch of the night. But so back to the story, the boat went 3 or 4 miles. It doesn't say that it went out 3 or 4 miles. It said it just traveled 3 or 4 miles. But there was a large wind, and it said that it was dark, so the people could not see where they were. And then it says that they saw somebody approaching the boat, and they were terrified. They were frightened because they thought that it says that they saw somebody, and they were frightened because they thought he was walking on water. And then it says, right after that, it says that they realized that they were at the shore, and then they welcomed him onto the boat. So the rational explanation was there was probably a large wind. They thought that they were far out at sea. Really, there was a large wind. It brought them. They couldn't see anything. It brought them back to the shore. They saw Jesus walking up they thought he was walking on the water. Really, he was just walking on the shore, or walking, with his feet ankle deep in the water, and they were frightened. But then they realized, oh, we're at the shore, and then they let him on the boat. So this is the rational explanation. And then people make rational explanations for all these, and they say not only can you make rational explanations, they say it's clearly the literature of the Gospels is trying to indicate that these things are not actually miracles, that they actually were things that can naturally occur. And then other people say that, when Jesus said that he didn't come to perform miracles, but, or any signs, but only that of the sign of Jonah, they say, that this is an indication that he did not actually perform miracles, that there is a rational explanation for everything that happened. This is people who actually think that Jesus existed. There's other people that think that it's all just literature. It's all just stories, oral tradition. I'm not associating myself with anyone. I just like to look at all the explanations. So we're on philosophy now, and I'm just talking about the rational explanations that people use for this. And then there's more, but okay. So I think that's good for now. Hopefully we can continue more in a minute.